Hi, my name is Jodi Flaws, and I'm a professor in the Department of Comparative Biosciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I put together this short video to provide some tips for finding a great lab. And it's particularly directed at students that are looking to join graduate programs as well as postdocs who are looking for positions as well. So I think one of the initial starting points that's very important is selecting a program. So if you're looking at different programs, you need to find a degree program in your area of interest. And I know many of you that are part of HEEDS are going to be interested in research on endocrine disrupting chemicals. And I just want to make a point that this type of research occurs in many different departments. So you may need to look at pharmacology departments, toxicology departments, chemistry departments, biology departments, environmental health, or physiology departments. So you really need to read online about different programs and look at the research that's going on in those programs and see which ones are really interesting to you. A second consideration is that it's very important that programs provide financial support for their trainees. So most graduate programs in the US that are in the area of endocrine disruption are going to be paying students stipends as well as providing tuition waivers. And so this is very important because there's really no time during graduate school or during your postdoctoral training to have another job to support yourself financially. So you need to make sure that the program you're going to join provides financial support for you. I also think it's important to look at individual programs and make sure that they have a solid history of graduating students or training postdocs. And this is really not going to be a major issue in most universities in the United States, but look at the universities and look at the programs and make sure that they do have a good history of training students. I also think picking a program, it's really important to make sure that program has potential faculty mentors for you. You're going to end up working in an individual faculty member's laboratory, and so you want to make sure that the program you choose has a faculty member whose research you're interested in and who you may want to join their laboratory. You also should consider whether you want to end up in a small lab versus a big lab, a small program versus a big program. What is a critical mass of trainees to you? There's no right answer as to whether a small program versus a big program or a small lab versus a big lab is better. What is going to be better is what works for you. How does your personality and work style match with that of a small laboratory and program versus a big laboratory and program? And then finally, when you're looking at programs, really make sure that the programs have state of the art facilities. Do they have the laboratory space and the equipment that's going to be required for you to conduct cutting edge state of the art research? Now, while you're considering programs, you really need to consider selecting a lab and a mentor. So read online and contact mentors to find out more about their research, but make sure you're really interested in the research topic. This is going to be a large part of your life during your training, and so you need to make sure that you're passionate about what you're studying. Now, equally as important, and sometimes perhaps more important, is you need to make sure and have complete confidence that the mentor's style matches your style and will facilitate your career goals. Really important to keep in mind that different mentors have vastly different styles. There's sometimes not a right style or a wrong style, but you have to know what that style is and if that style is going to match with your style and your needs. And keep in mind that the graduate student experience vastly differs among labs and vastly differs among individuals. You're going to want to make sure that there's a pleasant environment in the lab. You're going to spend lots of time working with people in the lab, so you need to make sure you can get along well with the group. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to hang out together all the time. outside of work. That's great if that happens and you develop lifelong friends, but you have to make sure that you can work together professionally and get along in a work environment with the people who are in the lab you're going to join. And then when you're looking at a particular lab or a mentor, I think it's important to look at what is their track record of students joining the lab, graduating, and obtaining their dream jobs. Now, this is a little hard to assess if it's a brand new faculty member or a brand new lab, but in labs that have been existing for a while, you want to make sure that the students that enter that lab graduate and then go on to get jobs. It's a very bad sign if a lab is attracting a lot of students, but none of those students are staying in the lab. They're all leaving to go to other labs or they're leaving without their degree. So how do you find out if you're going to be in a good program or a good laboratory? You need to really ask questions. And I think you need to start with asking questions of potential mentors. So when you meet with a mentor, or if you're going to contact them online or by email, you need to write them and set up some time to sit down and have a conversation. And I think it's really important to ask things like, what are your expectations of students? Specifically, what do I need to accomplish to graduate? In many labs, there's a nice set of goals that students have to meet, and then the students know what those goals are and then can meet them and graduate. But in other labs, the mentors do not make this clear, and it's never clear to students what they need to do to graduate. You need to ask, what is the average length of time it takes to obtain the master's or PhD degree in your lab? And you need to look at what that average is in the program. So if somebody has an average of 4 to 5 years for a PhD, that will be considered reasonable by many places and many trainees as well as mentors. However, if they tend to be on the later scale, where it's taking students in their lab 9 or 10 years to graduate, that may be something that you do not want to consider unless you really want to be in school for 9 or 10 years. And then you need to ask mentors, how are their students financially supported? In many universities, the graduate program will provide some initial support, but then student stipends and tuition waivers after that initial year come from the laboratory and the PI of the laboratory. And so you need to find out, is your mentor, potential mentor, going to have the funding to support you through your graduate training? I also think it's important to find out how many students are currently in the lab. And then if the lab is a big lab or a small lab, you need to think about whether this big or small lab is going to fit with what you're looking for in your training. And then I think it's really important to ask potential mentors, how many students have you trained and where are your former students now? And this is going to be very difficult to assess if you're looking at a laboratory that has a brand new PI or a brand new mentor. But those PIs, you could ask them questions about what other types of students have they trained. A lot of them will have trained undergraduate students or helped mentor graduate students when they were postdocs themselves. And so you need to ask about not only who have they trained, but where have these students gone? So for example, if a mentor's students 100% all dropped out, that's not a good sign. If the mentor students have gone into academia and you want to go into academia, that may be a good fit. If the mentor students have gone also into industry or government, and that is your career goal, then this may be a laboratory that's going to be a good fit for you. Additionally, I think it's important to ask mentors, what is your philosophy for training students? How do you feel about students going into academia, industry, or government after graduation? Some mentors really have their own career trajectory in their mind and expect their students to follow that exactly. and are not as flexible or understanding that there are lots of different opportunities for somebody to be a research scientist, and may or may not be supportive of going into more non-traditional types of career paths. And if you're headed towards one of those non-traditional career paths, you need to make sure your mentor is going to be supportive of that and help train you to meet those goals. I also think it's important to ask a mentor, how do students in your lab develop projects? Does the mentor give the students some freedom to tailor their project and move it in different directions? Or does the mentor expect a student to literally just do A, B, and C according to what the mentor is telling them to do? And there may not be a right or wrong way to do that, but you need to think about what are you hoping for in your training, and does this mentor's philosophy fit with what I need to get? And then I also think it's important to ask potential mentors, do trainees in your lab have the opportunity to be authors on manuscripts and write grant applications? In this field, it's really, really important to show productivity. And when you go to the next step of your career, people are going to look at your authorships and publication history. So you need to make sure that you're going to have an opportunity to be an author on manuscripts. If you are a trainee that's headed towards an academic career, it's really important to get experience with writing grant applications. So you need to find out, is this mentor going to be supportive of that? And I think it's a good to ask mentors, what is the expectation for number or types of publications needed to graduate? This goes back to what I said before, finding out what the expectations are to graduate. And many mentors will be able to say, well, I feel like if a student gets one first author or three first author publications, that's enough for a dissertation. Some won't be able to answer this, and I think you really need to find out what is the expectation as far as publications. I also think, speaking of publications, it's important to ask, how is authorship decided in your laboratory? Many times in the field, problems arise when there's not clarity on authorship and how that is decided. So I think asking a mentor how they decide on authorship will give you the information you need to have to feel a bit more confident that you're not going to have authorship issues down the road. And then if you're a postdoc, it's really important to ask potential mentors, how do they decide what postdocs can take with them from the lab to their new job in academia? As a postdoc, it's really, really important that you develop an independent research project that can leave with you when you begin your own lab. And so you need to make sure that the mentor is going to set you up for that and help you achieve that goal. Now, in addition to talking to mentors, it's really, really important to try to talk to current and, if possible, former trainees in the lab. And I think some questions that you should consider asking is, what is the mentor style? And think about if what the trainee is telling you matches what the mentor has told you about their style. Find out how often the mentor interacts with trainees in the lab. Some mentors are more hands-on and will meet with trainees daily. Other mentors don't meet with their trainees other than once a month or once every 6 months. You need to know that information so that you can decide what kind of mentoring style that you need and whether this mentor style of interaction works for you. I think it's always good to ask some open-ended questions. What do you like most about the mentor lab, or what do you like least about the mentor in the lab? Ask the trainees, how is the lab environment? The reality is that the trainees are the ones that are in the lab most of the time together, and they are the ones that really know how well people get along. And so I think trainees are going to be very honest with you, and they will tell you how the environment is and whether somebody works well together. You need to ask whether the trainees feel like the mentor supports your career goals and that they're very open to doing what is needed to get you to the next stage of your career. Ask the trainees whether the expectations set down by the mentor for graduation were clear, and ask them, would you join the lab again? Now, oftentimes, if a trainee is interviewing for my lab, I will send them to lunch or dinner with my lab without me being there, so that I purposely give applicants to my lab opportunity to talk to trainees in the lab without me there. If the lab you're interviewing in or considering does not do that, it's perfectly fair for you to ask the mentor, can you have some time to talk with their students? And if they don't allow you to do that, that's a huge red flag. Or if they don't offer that, or if you feel uncomfortable asking that, you can get so much information from the internet. Just email some of the former current trainees and set up some time to talk to them yourself. Now, even if everybody follows all the right advice, it's not perfect, and oftentimes problems can come up. So, worst case scenario, you join a lab and it works out to not be a good relationship or a good fit for you. I think some tips for problem solving are, first of all, do not panic. This happens to several people, and people do get past this and go on to have productive graduate training or postdoctoral training and productive careers. I think it's important for you to realize that you will hopefully have a thesis committee or a graduate program director or a trusted senior faculty member that you can go to and ask for advice. And often these people or combinations of these people can give you really good advice that's related to the specific problem that you're having. And oftentimes they can tell you how to solve that problem, and most of the time they're solvable problems. However, I will say if you get into a situation where you cannot fix the problem and the environment or the mentor or the research is not an ideal fit for you, do not be afraid to change labs if a bad situation does not improve. However, if you go down this path, you need to think about it and go do it through a very professional and careful way. And oftentimes, a senior faculty member or a graduate program director or somebody on your thesis committee can help you do this. So I thank you, and I wish everybody the best of luck in their training and in their careers.